Okay. Hello, everybody. Yep, cool. Should I start? Good stuff. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Furality. I am Alex Fly UK, and I'm doing a panel about crafting a visual novel. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, everyone is nice and comfy. Let's start. So, crafting a visual novel. So, in this panel, you are going to learn what exactly is a visual novel. Possibly heard of them, but you may not know what they are. So, I'm going to tell you what it is and what makes them so appealing exactly, and why they're selling so many copies. Also be talking about the history of visual novels and kind of a little bit about what makes them tick and the kind of good examples of where they have succeeded in the past as well. I've also got some examples of modern uses of the visual novel formula and how even modern games are starting to muscle in on their slice of the pie by having text-heavy stories. And the last thing I'll probably talk about is my visual novel project that I'm working on as well, based on kind of experiences I've had, and let you know my plans for the future. And then we'll talk about how visual novel as a genre is kind of changing and how that's going to adapt based on the future. So, to start with, what exactly is a visual novel? Well, visual novel, usually abbreviated as VN, is a video game that you interact with, along to, and it's quite similar to what they used to call the choose your own adventure books. So, for example, it could be things like fighting fantasy, reboot. So it's ones where you say, get to a section of the book and it says, do you do this or do you do that? It's then to page 3 or page 5. So you kind of have a different kind of choice of what happens based on your choices. So as you can imagine, it's a combination of two different worlds: visual for obviously the visuals, animations, and characters, and the graphics that's happening, and novel for the fact that it's got quite a lengthy narrative. And yeah, in comparison to the amount of characters, it's very much like a book or a huge novel, exactly. Simplest form of these is actually a visual novel we call a kinetic novel. So unlike the other kind of novel, it doesn't involve branching paths. It's quite linear. I can have some sounds and animations, but it's pretty much almost a little bit like a bit of a presentation. But it's kind of taking you through so you kind of hear things. That's how that goes. You also have different kinds of visual novels, which are more like almost like a mini adventure where you have puzzle segments, puzzle solving to do, interactive objects to touch and interact with, even just rudimentary kind of. You can even have a basic video game kind of thing going on as well. So that does kind of cross over into the whole VN genre. And on the flip side to that, also you have other games which is like a normally kind of like an action game, and then all of a sudden they have these visual novel sequences, and some of those have romances and things like that as well. So I shall cover that a little bit later on. So, what are the actual hallmarks and what's the important features of visual novels exactly? Well, there's a large amount of text, which most of them seem to have. There's quite a few features, branching narratives being one of them. So, for example, you could have multiple choice adventures, you could have multiple endings, you could have a good ending, bad ending, branching paths. And then sometimes you also have a new game plus, which kind of takes you back all the way back to the start of the story, but kind of with extra information and choices. So that kind of shapes things out a little bit differently second time or however many times you go through the game. Choices can lead to things happening quite differently. So one choice you could make could be a good choice, and then suddenly you have a bad choice, and that could even end the story if it's a really bad choice. Although normally you do get quite a lot of warning if it is a really bad choice. But sometimes developers can play real tricks, and sometimes they can catch you off guard with that, though. It's something you have to look out for every now and again. Another key feature about visual novels is sometimes you could be given a choice to have a form of friendship with a certain character, or even a romantic friendship. There's the harem genre, which is where you have multiple girls and one boy, and reverse harem, which is you have multiple boys and one girl. So you obviously almost playing matchmaker, choosing what the most appropriate match is. Some of these games let you choose your character's appearance, other details, or even gender, etc. And the visual novels also usually have some more memorable moments. They happen in CG form, which is normally a big piece of artwork or a very detailed piece of art with multiple frames. So it could be a moment of intense action, could be a romantic scene, could be a scary scene. And there's the kind of typical anime things like beach parties or hot spring scenes, which is a staple of this genre. So that does happen. And kind of spinning off from that, you also have games like Fallout and Skyrim, which have tons of text. So what I would say is, can't really consider them visual novels because the text is only like a small part of the game, and even the choices. There's a lot of extra things in the game which is definitely not text. So those I probably wouldn't consider visual novels. And even the Mass Effect series has a large amount of text and quite a few choices, and you've got the romance options there, so there's definitely a little bit of a crossover. But yeah, most of the big decisions in those kind of games tend to happen at the end, just to kind of minimize the amount of extra work you have to do in terms of those kind of games. So, visual novel case study 1, Phoenix Wright is Journey. So, this series originally started out on Game Boy Advance. I think it's going on a few decades now. And then that was brought to the West with the release of the DS version, which was a bit of like a remake, which had some extra things and obviously made use of the dual screens. And that game features mainly courtroom battles. You also got investigation segments, and it pretty much plays like a detective show. So you're trying to find out who the killer is, defend your client, and there's that all back and forth there. Yeah, it starts back all the way back in 2001. Yeah, game series by Capcom, and latest one came out in 2017. Yeah, you play as Phoenix, a lawyer trying to make sure the clients are innocent. And what you do is you cross-examine the witnesses, try and poke holes in their testimony, and you basically try and try and solve the crime. Investigation segment normally take the point of point and click adventures, so you can kind of walk around, look at an object, pick it up, and that can unlock extra things with other bits of dialogue with other people. That kind of flows on in that kind of story. The story itself is quite linear because there is only ever going to be one killer and one victim, so it's kind of all following one straight path. But there's like kind of branching dialogues. There's other things you can do, and there's a lot of things to keep you busy in those kind of games. And yeah, the main subject of the game is murder and violent crime, so it's quite serious in tone, especially with the courtrooms. But there is some more light-hearted moments as well. So that kind of brings it all back. And case study 2, a game called Hakuwaki, Shinsengumi Kitan, or Demon of the Fleeting Blossom. So that was a series created by Idea Factory. First launched on PlayStation 2 in 2008. Also got released on PSP and 3DS in 2012 and 2013. So this game is actually loosely based on historical fact, and that involved a special police force unit, the Shinsengumi, and that's set in 1860s era Japan. So you play as Chizuru Yukimura, so you're a young girl trying to make contact with your uncle, who's obviously doing something else. And then all of a sudden you end up in quite a grisly scene in the middle of Kyoto and get saved by the Shinsengumi. And you get mistaken for a spy, and then you get taken under the wing, and then you kind of get safeguarded because there's a lot more going on. That kind of gets revealed as the story goes on. And this is part of the reverse harem genre. So, for example, you play as the female character, and you have to choose which of the guys you want to kind of go with or potentially form a romance with. And the different choices you make kind of affect what's going to happen in terms of who's with what and what goes on, basically. And then later on in the game, there's a kind of substance later on that the hero find called the Water of Life, and that gives characters like a blood hunger or like frenzy. So the kind of different choices you make could possibly literally have life and death consequences depending on what happens. Yeah, it's quite an interesting kind of mechanic actually, and yeah, they do touch on it in quite a few interesting ways. Besides the main game, they also really sequel to it later on, and there was also an anime series as well where they kind of what they did was they adapted best bits of it, so they kind of took the most interesting scenes, kind of weaved it all together in a kind of almost a semi-original story of its own. And the cast gets smaller and smaller due to reasons that I can't possibly go into. So if you're interested, do have a look. Case study 3, the final case study I have, is a game called Coffee Talk. Now this is quite an interesting one. It actually came out very early this year, January 2020. So premise of this one is kind of interesting. You are a barista or a coffee shop owner in modern world, although the world is inhabited by humans, creatures, and other mythical beings. So it's a kind of a mix of the realistic and the fantasy. It kind of really sets the scene. And stories are quite true to life as well. So it's about kind of persecution, about racism, about not getting on with parents. So it's all that kind of stuff all weaved in like a modern kind of setting. Pretty cool. And then a lot of the actual game content is like dialogue between characters, they're kind of discussing things, they're trying to decide what they want to do with their life. And the game doesn't necessarily give you a lot of huge choices, but usually it comes down to what kind of drinks you make. So if you make the right drink, the customer will be happy. Otherwise, if you do it too many times, they'll obviously be less happy. And also, at one critical point, making a character a special drink would be very important. And the character designs are really clever. We've got like orc, elf, werewolf, etc. Loads of like fantastic creatures and fantastic people. And the animation style is really, really cool. You have these awesome little 2D animations. Also got the music, which is just really chill and really lo-fi, which is perfect for the game. And also, when you beat the game, there's a new game plus, which kind of twists things around in an interesting little way, gives you a whole new ending, and probably another reason for you to check it out on the end. So, how have these experiences influenced me? Well, I have created a visual novel that I'm working on at the moment. The name is called Solito, or HV, and basically these characters have like elemental abilities. So yeah, fire, water, wind, etc. And but it's kind of a bit of a mix because it's mixed with like modern technology and science as well. So you've got kind of like bits of space travel, etc. in there as well. So you have these evil organizations, you've got these kind of demonic characters that kind of causing chaos. So there's quite a bit to the story and quite a lot of characters, which means it takes a while for me to make it. But yeah, all these kind of visual novels and like, other media like TV and everything has inspired me. So I kind of really enjoy writing these kind of long scenarios and stories. Again, I kind of felt like I wasn't not too much into like the whole programming side or 3D side of gaming, so I decided to kind of go with this kind of medium because I like writing text. So that's how that kind of came to be. And I like the idea how you got like a range of 2D sprites. You can have like a sprite sheet, you can have different poses, different emotions. You have little animations here and there, and it really kind of like brings the story to life, which is quite cool. So it's almost like a really realistic kind of comic kind of thing, which I quite like. So my plan is I'm gonna try and get basic story finished. Gonna add in like more choices and stuff later on down the line. It's gonna be mainly linear, but with like a few different choices and a few different things. So it'll kind of depend on what the characters choose to do. So I'm kind of emulating like some of my favorite visual novels, and hopefully I'm gonna make the first version free and then do a full release later on next year, I think. But that'll take a little while. Back to visual novels. So, what's the state of play for visual novels at the moment? Well, there's an increasingly large number of existing visual novels, and they're getting ported to other systems. So, for example, since we've had the decline of the PS Vita and the 3DS, that's leading to more games being remastered and published on stuff like that, the Nintendo Switch, PS4, etc. So there's loads of like HD releases. I think at this point, probably companies are more likely to try and revitalize something that was quite popular and successful, and they're kind of a little bit more hesitant to do new stuff. That seems to be more the indie side, which is kind of doing that. And in terms of the price point, most you can play quite a few of them free, but other ones cost between $6 to $8. But you can also have some premium ones as well because of the high quality that people playing on what's going on. And there's a lot more ones with 3D visuals as well. I think that's probably going to happen a lot more. And there's also interest in virtual reality as well, due to second-hand units being more affordable and more popular. So you've had a bit of a mixed bag in terms of like the other examples of like kind of adventure games, like Telltale games, and have struggled for a while. Then there's other games like, for example, Life is Strange, which was fairly popular, I believe, and I think other studios still going to pursue that kind of thing. And you've also got games like Fire Emblem Three Houses, where they have like almost like a mini visual novel built into that, and the romantic choices, that kind of stuff as well, along with the other indie visual novels. Probably going to be quite a few over the next decade, I would imagine, and even ones that incorporate multiple genres. It's definitely possible. So, future of visual novels. Well, games industry is just starting to heat up again with Sony and Microsoft about to release brand new consoles. So I would suspect we're going to see some new interesting visual novels that appear. Going to be obviously increased graphical fidelity. There's going to be like better looking games and ones that run a lot better. And I think we're probably going to look at more customization in terms of the player characters, because that's something that we've seen happen from other games. So there's going to be ways to customize the main character, otherwise non-player characters in game world itself possibly as well. And together with that, there's going to be more tools for people to create visual novels as well. There's quite a few that popped up on Steam, quite a few other ones as well. Multiple languages, 2D games, 3D games, Unity, etc. So there's a load of different ways to create them. You just have to be brave enough to give it a go. And the good thing about playing those is that mobile phone storage is growing and growing as day goes night. And you'll be able to fit many of them on your phones without any problems, and it makes it a lot easier to test on mobile devices since everyone's got one pretty much. Also renewed interest in different genres, because we've had a little bit of a peak in terms of modern AAA games. Always seeing the same old thing every now and again. That is kind of changing. Yeah, and there's kind of that little gap hidden as the PS Vita and 3DS have gone, so we're probably going to see more of those on smartphones, more on VR as well, and home consoles. It's going to be more advanced features, such as use of text-to-speech, also fully voiced visual novels, which take a long time to make. We've also got live 2D animations, which is kind of almost like a little animation of a 2D character. That could involve things like motion capture, etc. So again, it just brings things to life a little bit more than anything else. So thank you all for watching. Do feel free to let me know if you've got any questions about visual novels or anything like that. My details, if you want to know more about me, is I'm at AlexFlyUK on Twitter and Telegram, and I also do some Twitch streams during the week as well. So that's twitch.tv/AlexFlyUK, and YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/c/AlexFlyUK. And the visual novel game that I'm working on is fearlessphillysaw.net for any future development. Otherwise, thanks for watching the panel, and hopefully you have an amazing Furality 2000. Thank you.